I'm excited to be here with our tax team to discuss the House tax bill. With a historic budget surplus, we are bringing forward the largest tax cuts in state history. Our bill contains tax cuts in the form of credits, rebates, and other provisions that will help Minnesota workers, families, and seniors. Chair Gomez will go into the details, but I am especially excited about our proposed child and working family tax credit, which would reduce child poverty by nearly a quarter. Governor Walz put an inspiring vision forward in his inaugural address earlier this year when he said we should address childhood poverty and make Minnesota the best state for children. We share that goal with the governor, and our tax bill, combined with the rest of our budget, would make significant progress towards that goal. At the same time, we know most of this surplus is one-time money. And as Chair Gomez has so well stated in committee, the pandemic was not felt evenly, and the economic recovery has not been felt equally. Our tax bill takes steps to make our tax system more fair and more equitable and fund the priorities that Minnesotans value most, both now and into the future. The House DFL budget invests in Minnesotans' priorities of education, healthcare, economic security, and the safety and vitality of our communities. Investing in these areas both now and into the future requires an ongoing commitment. We're proposing to make the tax code more fair and more progressive to provide sustainable funding for education, healthcare, transportation, and so much more. I'm very grateful to Tax Chair Aisha Gomez, Property Tax Division Chair Dave Listagard, and the members of these two committees who have worked so hard to put this bill together. With that, I'll turn it over to Chair Gomez.
Thank you so much, Speaker Hortman. Good afternoon, everybody. The pandemic laid bare the harsh realities of this economy for working class and middle class Minnesotans. While corporations posted record profits and the rich became even richer, so many in our communities couldn't stay home. They went to work and they kept the economy going. Healthcare workers cared for the ill and the dying. Food systems workers kept our state fed, often at great personal cost. It's more obvious today than ever that we have collectively accepted the unacceptable, that in a prosperous state, in the most prosperous country that's literally ever existed, we have people sleeping outside. We have kids living in poverty. We have seniors who can't afford to stay in their homes. We have accepted an economy that works exceptionally well for very few and leaves most of us behind. We're here in this place with the honor of serving our communities for a limited time. And while we're here, I'm committed, and the DFL House is committed to doing the most good for the people of Minnesota that we possibly can. That is the ethic that's woven through our budget, and it's why I'm proud that we'll present the 2023 tax bill this week. This bill is the result of so much work by so many smart people, staff, and legislators, and I extend my sincere gratitude to them for their commitment. As you heard from Speaker Hortman, this bill constitutes the largest tax cut in Minnesota history. But these aren't just any tax cuts. The cuts in this bill are targeted to those who need it the most, including seniors living on fixed incomes, families and children living in poverty, and Minnesotans across the state who are facing high property tax bills. By targeting tax cuts to those who need it the most, we support the investments in the rest of our incredible budget while keeping our promises to future generations of Minnesotans through fiscal responsibility and sound budget management. More than 150,000 children live in poverty in Minnesota. As Speaker Hortman said, we create a new and greatly simplified child and working family tax credit, picking up where the expired federal child tax credit left off, and cutting child poverty in Minnesota by almost a quarter. We offer more help for low-income filers without dependents and for those filing with individual tax identification numbers, a long overdue fairness and equity measure in our tax bill. Our approach to Social Security ensures that any senior making $100,000 for married filing jointly or $78,000 for single and head of household will not pay tax on their Social Security benefits. That means 76% of seniors will pay no tax at all on these benefits. The bill includes a one-time rebate check of $275 per adult and child in families making less than $150,000 a year. So for a family of four, this would be $1,200. That's real money at the income level that it's targeted at. and more than 2.5 million returns would receive the rebate. There are two main revenue raisers in the bill, both of which are not just about ensuring that the state can continue to invest in the public good into the future, but about promoting fairness and equity in the tax code, and by extension, promoting fairness in the economy at large. The first is a millionaire's tax. The rate would be just an extra % on each dollar above $1 million, and it would apply to 0.8% of filers. The second revenue raiser is worldwide combined reporting, which would address the longstanding issue of the biggest multinational corporations in the world stashing their profits in overseas tax havens to avoid Minnesota taxes. This puts our local businesses at a competitive disadvantage, and it's just wrong. Whether worldwide combined reporting raised $1 or $1 billion, it is the right thing to do, and I'm very proud to include this provision in the bill. The tax bill also, of course, contains the incredible property tax division report that Chair Dave Lislegard worked so hard to put together this session. When we at the state fall short on making the investments that our communities need, the burden falls to our local partners. And their main tool that they have, property taxes. When you pair the reality of state support not keeping up with expenses and the increase in homestead valuations, you have a lot of people across the state with rising and unsustainable property tax bills. Chair Lislegard addresses this in two ways. First, we move toward keeping our commitments to our local partners by increasing local government aid and county program aid, which has lagged for decades as a victim of budget tricks and gimmicks. The increase is $100 million a year for each program. We also increase other aids to local governments, including soil and water conservation districts and those communities that are impacted by our transition to a clean energy future. Second, we increase property tax refunds to directly help those who are having trouble today with these bills. We increase refunds for all recipients moving forward. We add a one-time bump to address this year's valuation increases, and we add a targeted program for those who've seen big year-over-year increases, regardless of their income. Finally, we convert the renter's property tax refund to a refundable income tax credit, pulling it onto the M1 form, which greatly simplifies the process for the filer and makes the refund accessible to more than 100,000 lower-income renters who are currently leaving the refund on the table because of the complication of filing. There are so many other great things about this bill. There are measures in here to help young people struggling with unsustainable student loan debt, to increase the supply of housing, to help tribal governments serve their communities, and many, many other great things. And Chair Lislegard and I can't wait to talk more about all of them today and over the weeks ahead. But with that, we can move to questions.
Total value is under your target, looks like 2.9999.
Sorry?
Total is under your target, it looks like it's 2.999.
In the first biennium?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like a couple $1,000s. It's very close. It's as close as we could get it without causing other spreadsheet issues.
How much does the worldwide reporting requirement raise?
So worldwide reporting raises $452 million in the first biennium, and then over $700 million in the second biennium.
Could you understand how many more people would qualify for a fully exempted Social Security subtraction than is presently in place?
Yeah, so the issue with the way, so currently 52% of Social Security recipients pay no tax on their Social Security benefits. Under our plan, it would be 76% of those receiving benefits who wouldn't pay. There's a little bit of a complication because one of the things, again, to the point about simplicity, is that, setting this cap or setting this kind of like level to say that anybody, a married couple making $100,000, those people would pay no tax on their Social Security benefits, isn't how we do it right now. So you can't make that kind of statement about anybody making 60 grand or whatever, because it's a complicated combination of a state, a federal exemption and then a state subtraction. But I mean, those percentages, going from 52 to 76%, of those receiving benefits paying no tax.
Could you speak to why you stopped there? And I think even your local government chair there wanted to go further and do the full repeal.
Yeah, so the Social Security subtraction costs about $500 million. The 100,000, setting the $100,000 level, and doing the entire Social Security subtraction, or exempting all Social Security is $1.3 billion in this biennium, $1.5 billion in the tails. So we could have just done that. Our tails target was $1.3 billion, so we could have almost just done that. Instead, we go a different direction and we say that we want to help low-income seniors who wouldn't have received any benefits from a full Social Security exemption. Because those bottom 52% who under the current treatment aren't paying any taxes, they would have received nothing from the full exemption. So instead, we invest in property tax refunds, and I will say that 45% of homestead property tax refunds go to seniors and people with disabilities. 1/3 of the renter's rebate is claimed by seniors and people with disabilities, and these are our lowest income seniors. And so we made a choice that we're not just gonna help the highest income seniors, we're actually gonna help those who are struggling with their bills. And so that was the trade-off between doing a full Social Security exemption and then investing in these other programs and these other Minnesotans who really need the help in this time.
You talked about the millionaire's tax and the worldwide tax, let's call it that, I'm already forgetting its name. Does this at all include the metro county taxes for housing or transit?
So those taxes are carried in the housing and transportation bills respectively, yeah. So those are the big revenue raisers in this bill. There's one other small one that's related to conformity.
What was the thinking in including the, removing the e-poll tabs open all provision in the tax bill?
I can say that that is to align our policy with a recent court case, and most importantly, to keep our promises to the sovereign nations that share the geography of Minnesota. The speaker thinks that it's really important that when she makes a deal, and when we as an institution make a deal, that we stay true to that. And the design of the e-poll tabs, as reflected in the court case, doesn't really align with that original deal.
I can also add that at the leadership table, when we discussed the targets, we all discussed paying off the stadium bonds early and where would we handle that matter and issues related to stadium financing, and we agreed that it would be in the tax bill.
And what do you do with does this pay off the stadium?
We don't have language in this bill that pays off the stadium. I think, the conversations at leadership have been that, that conversation will be ongoing. We do have some language related to the stadium in the bill, but it's sort of so that we can continue that conversation as we move through conference.
So what do you do with that money?
Put it in the general fund.
You put it in the general fund without paying off the stadium?
So in this bill, there isn't. There is a small, because of the way that the charitable gambling gross receipts tax or net receipts tax is calculated, that comes out of the stadium reserve account. But other than that, we include some language about, the MMB potentially defeasing the stadium bonds, but we don't move money in or out of the stadium reserve account in any significant way in this bill.
I can speak to that. So it's the intention that we pay off the bonds early. And once the bonds are paid off, there's no need to have a stadium reserve account anymore, because the purpose of the account is to pay off the bonds. And this is something we have been battling with Republicans about for years. So typically the language would travel in state government finance, but the money is in the tax bill.
Talk about the process of, getting the rebate checks in there. My understanding is there was a little bit of hesitancy at some point along in the process of actually getting those rebate checks as part of this package.
I think that you know, in aligning with overall with the ways that we wanted to do tax cuts in this bill, that when we added the income targeting, I think that addressed, you know, some of the concerns of some people in our caucus of like, you know, we don't need to send a relatively small check to a relatively wealthy person that isn't gonna be really felt in their personal economy. I guess I'll speak for myself and say that, you know, I think that doing a refund like this is a good use of one-time money in a tax bill. And so, you know, we really focused on getting money into the pockets of the Minnesotans who need it the most. And I think that the way that the rebate is designed aligns with that goal.
Did you know how many are going to get that rebate check under your plan? How many Minnesotans?
Yeah, so it's 2.5 million, 2.562 million.
Is there an income threshold? What's the income threshold for the working child credit and working?
Okay, so that, it's a little bit complicated, but it's in the range of about 35,000 is where the phase out begins. And then I think I have the whole full phase out. I mean, it's hard because it depends really like on how many kids you have and what the filing status is. But yeah, it's targeted at lower income Minnesotans. And, you know, the highest phase out, it kind of goes from like, you know, it begins to phase out at about $33,000 to $35,000 of income. And for most family kind of arrangements, you know, number of kids, it's fully phased out by in the, you know, $50,000 to $65,000 to $70,000 range, depending again on how many dependents you have. And I have more detail about that if you need it.
Without getting too deep in the weeds, you talked about the market value pressure component where houses that have gone up a certain amount, regardless of the value of the house, will get some sort of shock absorber. Is that for this pay year or for next year? How does it work?
Okay, so this you're testing my knowledge, but so what it's designed to do is to be for it's for tax year 23. Sorry, I'm looking at my staff. So it's for tax year 23, which is where we saw the big spike in valuation and the big spike in property tax rebates. And so we designed it so that it's going to be paid out in tax year 24, which is how the property tax refund works, is that it sort of like lags behind a year. But we did with both the one-time bump and then we call it the targeting program, which means that like if year over year your property tax bill went up more than 6%, then depending on your income, then you get a property tax refund. With both of those, the idea was to address that spike in valuation and the spike in property tax levies, which we've kind of have seen over the last year.
Will that part be automatic? Because a lot of the people who have seen some of the bigger spikes are priced out of the other property tax refund program. So how are they going to know if they have to do something to get that under your proposal?
That's a good question. Chair Lissegard, do you know the answer to that question?
Patrick.
I assume, okay, they will still have to apply, no?
Goes through, yeah.
Yeah, it's not an audit, so the issue is that, because the Department of Revenue doesn't collect, all of the data on property taxes because it's not a state tax, so it's levied at the local level. And so there's a little bit of a challenge, because of the cities and the counties not having income data on their property taxpayers, and the Department of Revenue not having like perfect market value or valuation data and property tax data on those ratepayers. So it does rely on the homeowner or the renter. I mean, in this case, this is for homeowners, but they have to apply. And so one of the things that we did in the bill, understanding that, you know, between this and the conversion of the renter's credit, the renter's property tax refund to a refundable income tax credit, is that we provided extra support for community education and, you know, for our Vita sites and other partners to get the word out to people, because it was really important to Chair Lissegard and I both. You know, when we looked, we saw in our communities, the Iron Range and the south side of Minneapolis, so many people are leaving this money on the table, people who really need the help, just because they don't know about the program or because they need assistance filling out the forms, and it gets filed at a different time of year. And so that's one of the things that we do in this bill, is we really tried to provide some resources to the department to ensure that everybody who's eligible has the information that they need to apply.
The child tax credit, I know an initial proposal that was much larger, there was a talk about instructing the Department of Revenue to pay out that credit in monthly disbursements, like the federal tax credit that you mentioned. Is that going to be something that you would ask the Revenue Department to do, so they get that monthly payment for those people who need it?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think that, especially at the level that the federal tax credit was, the monthly payments were really important for families. Unfortunately, we're not able to, to do the full kind of amount that the feds did. And so it's a lower amount of money, but there still has been conversation about doing some advance payment, whether that's kind of a quarterly or a twice a year thing. And we do include language in the bill that enables the Department of Revenue to do that if we kind of collectively decide that makes sense and that it's technically possible. There are also a couple of concerns that we have to address about whether an advance payment or one of these sort of rebate checks would be counted as income for the purposes of calculating someone's income for other public programs. So there are a couple of outstanding issues with that, but I think that the governor's office has expressed some interest in that. Certainly, people in the community really liked that structure of the child tax credit, so it's on the table, but it's not really buttoned up, yeah.
Local option sales taxes on this, in this bill, or are they writing aloud?
We don't have any local option sales taxes in this bill. What we have is a task force to study local taxes. As a lot of people know by this point about my opinion about this, is that there are kind of equalization issues with the proliferation of local option sales taxes. We have $2.75 billion of local option sales tax proposals before the legislature this year, and that's a really significant amount of money. And I personally feel that somebody's ability to have access to good public services shouldn't depend on whether they have a mall in their community or a big retail base. That the public goods should be available to all, regardless of their geography. And that's part of a proud tradition in Minnesota. That's what the Minnesota Miracle was. It was in exchange for saying, we're not going to do these local taxes. Instead, we're going to provide more need-based state aid to communities so that they can meet the needs of their people. So there's sort of a need to take kind of a step back and look at the whole system, and so that's what we attempt to do in this bill.
So what do you say to those folks who see the $30 million for pothole or street maintenance relief that St. Paul gets and says, well, where's our share?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think that, the needs, if anybody's driven around our capital city in the last couple of months, then they have seen the really extreme need in this community. And the fact is that, our road and street infrastructure in general in Minnesota needs help. And that's why we have a robust transportation bill. And that conversation is evolving, through the process right now. There is an acute need in St. Paul. And because of their property tax base and the wear on their roads, because of them being the capital city, we believed that they warranted this kind of one-time aid to buy us a year to look at the bigger picture of sort of local taxes, and especially its relation to that kind of basic infrastructure. Because roads are actually, and streets are sort of the one thing that they've been excluded generally from local option sales taxes. And so, again, our infrastructure in Minnesota needs help more comprehensively. St. Paul is in an acute kind of emergency situation, and if the more that we put it off, the worse and more costly it gets.
Chair Gomez, could you speak to the public safety requests that the governor made? I thought maybe those would show up as aids and credits, and they don't appear to be in your bill. there's a little bit of public safety money in the omnibus for community groups, but not for police departments. Why did you decide not to send out another pot of money to local governments for public safety?
So I believe that, the public safety funding should happen in the Public Safety Committee. And I know that Chair Moeller is taking a really thoughtful approach to how to do public safety funding right. And, so I would defer to her about questions on how we should fund public safety. I will say that, in our bill, we don't do a one-time public safety aid, but we do ongoing support to communities across the state, with which you could hire a police officer, which you can't do with a one-time bump. So, I think that kind of conversation about how it is that we fund public safety, which is this critically important need, of course, to communities across the state, is sort of best had in the Public Safety Committee. And, I'm really proud of the House's position on this, which has been funding for public safety, funding for, community groups who are building public safety outside of law enforcement, and accountability for those who we count on to protect and serve us.
Have considered in the past a child care and dependent tax credit, but it doesn't seem like you all went with that unless I'm missing something. Can you just talk about that not being in the bill as far as I can tell?
Yeah, there's one provision related to the child and dependent care credit, which was that single parents can't claim the extra newborn credit, so we fixed that. But we don't do a big increase in the child and dependent care credit. It's not because we don't believe that it's necessary and worthy. I mean, there are really major issues within the child care system and the early education system in Minnesota, and we need to fix that system. We kind of took it's not that they're mutually exclusive, but kind of within our budget reality, we made choices, and we chose, to go with this sort of expanded child tax credit that would cut child poverty by almost 1/4.
Speaker Hortman, for you, please. There was a press conference this morning. Republicans held this Truth in Taxation event where they said there were almost $10 billion in tax hikes from Democrats, and they listed a bunch of things they would have done differently and have a different plan. A, your reaction to that, and B, what of it? I mean, you're in control. Does that even matter? Do they have anything? Do you take heed of any of that?
Well, of course it matters. It's really important for us to have a full debate of all the issues here. I didn't hear the Republican press conference, so I couldn't really speak intelligently to any of the points that they made. I do know that some of the numbers that they're throwing around don't add up and include some double counting. So what I would say is, the way the legislative process works is different than when the governor's budget comes out. When the governor's budget comes out, what are all the taxes, what are all the fees? The legislative process is we start with a block of clay and we are sculpting. And we are continuing that process of sculpting. There's a lot of conversation going on right now, for example, leading up to our debate today on the Environment and Natural Resources Bill. My understanding is that the angling community wants the daily price of a fishing license to go from 12 to 15 so that more sustained investment in the fish hatcheries can go forward. But that's a conversation we'll be having in the context of the Environment Bill. I know that the Agriculture Bill has a fee for feral pig and mink farming, and that fee will go from $10, which was established in 1985, to $100 because the fund doesn't currently contain enough money to catch the feral pigs and the minks who escape. And we think maybe the mink farmers and the feral pig farmers should pay for that rather than the general taxpayer. So I think, you have to look at all these fees one by one, and we will have those discussions and those debates within the context of each of the budget bills.
They were saying that, Speaker Hartman, during this Republican thing that Susie referred to, they said that the paid family leave is going to be this huge backdoor tax because school districts and local government are going to have to jack up local taxes to pay for their paid leave programs.
Well, the unemployment insurance system is one of those things that benefits all of us. We all pay a tiny increment of each of our paychecks, and our employers do for us as well, so that if we are laid off and we experience unemployment, that fund is there for us when we need it. Paid family medical leave would work exactly the same way Every industrialized country in the world has it. I think about 11 other states have it, and it's functioning well. I know in Washington State, when I spoke with the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader there, I think they got the Democratic trifecta in 2019 and put it into place, and their population says, like, why didn't you do this sooner? This is just so logical. After COVID-19, I would think the one thing we would kind of all coalesce around is we really don't want people coming to work sick because they're afraid of missing a paycheck.
Representative Lislegard, can you just talk about how you think this tax bill plays in some more conservative districts, whether it's your own or some other areas? You know, it's a tax target that's smaller than the 444 deal last year. It's got some tax increases and things like that, some smaller Social Security than you wanted, among some other things. How do you think this plays well on the Iron Range or in some of the more conservative districts held by Democrats?
Well, I'll begin by saying that last year we had an agreement, and we wouldn't be having the conversation today regarding the elimination of Social Security tax if that agreement would have been done. And we have a new legislature, and we have a new dynamic. And what I would say is I would like to thank Chair Gomez and Speaker Hortman for allowing me to be a part of this. You need to look at it holistically, and that's what I tried to do. And you have to, the legislature is about compromise. And I would think about when people ask me about increases, you look at the worldwide reporting and what that's going to do. In 2016, I believe, President Trump, with a trifecta of Republicans, eliminated that. And we have tried for multiple years. And I keep hearing that, you know, there's $17.6 billion. We need to be very clear that there's only $5.6 billion of ongoing. So when you have a moment and you have timing from a perception standpoint, maybe it doesn't seem like it's the right time, but it's exactly the right moment. We have a trifecta, and we are committed to closing that loophole to help our taxpayers in this state. And so I believe in this tax bill. Is any bill perfect? No. But is this a bill that I can get behind and support? You are exactly right. 24% regarding the Social Security, only 24%, right, are not going to be covered. And do they really need to be covered? I don't know. I would think not, but think about all the other opportunities and tax cuts and relief that we're providing to the vast majority. This is a document that is fair, it's pragmatic, and it's reasonable. And I think that anybody that really takes a deep dive into what it is would be supporting it. Now, you're going to, you know that you're going to hear that, hey, they didn't eliminate the tax on full elimination, right? Well, I tell you what, this bill is going to improve people's lives. Just like Chair Gomez said, the people who need it the most. And that's why I am fully behind it. I support this bill, and I think the state of Minnesota would be blessed if this bill passed as is.
Can you touch on briefly about the, I know you had said that DFL will go their own way on infrastructure if the Republicans don't play ball with bonding. There was the budget target around $3 billion. If there is an agreement on bonding, how do you envision that? Would that target shift, or would any of it go to increasing more of the tax bill? How do you see that?
We have a budget agreement between the House and the Senate and the governor, and the bonding target has $2.298 billion in it. The tax target is firm at $3 billion in the first biennium and $1.3 billion in the tails. I know that some of the conversations that the Senate has been having is about increasing our investment in transportation in the bonding bill to try to get more Republican support. And I think that $2.298 billion, if you want to look at that as alternate ways to fund infrastructure, I certainly think that transportation is in the realm of infrastructure, but the rest of the targets are firm.
Speaker Hortman, the Senate backed away from the delivery fee as part of their transportation bill. It's going to be politically difficult for them to get it through their chamber. Are you guys still going to move ahead with that?
Well, that's a good question for Chair Hornstein. I believe that we are. In 2008, shortly after the bridge collapse on August 1st, 2007, when 13 Minnesotans drowned in the Mississippi River or were crushed to death, we passed a transportation finance bill that brought in new revenue for the state of Minnesota, but we had to cut the revenue raisers in half to get Republican support to override a Republican governor who was unwilling to raise any revenue. And at that time, part of the reason that 35W Bridge was not examined as a candidate for rebuilding is it was a budget-busting project. They couldn't even conceive of doing a bridge project like that. So in 2008, when we passed new revenue, the last time we passed new revenue for transportation, it was inadequate. We knew it was inadequate because it was a compromise. We also know that in 2013 and 2014, when revenue was on the table, that we didn't pass that because people were concerned about the politics. If you ask the average voter, would you like to pay more gas tax or would you like to pay more of any kind of tax, they're generally going to say no. But when you ask a voter, would you like to drive on safer roads? Would you like to have safe bridges? Would you like to have transit that serves you, whether you live in St. Peter, Minnesota or St. Paul, Minnesota? People say yes. So I think we'll be having that conversation on the transportation bill. I believe that there is support in the House to do that delivery fee. They have implemented it in Colorado in lieu of a gas tax, with the thinking that as much as we all hate taxes and fees, that people hated the delivery fee less than they hated the gas tax. Now, many Republican trifecta states have increased the gas tax over the last 10 years, but Minnesota has not been a state that's been able to even increase our gas tax to match inflation. And asphalt and rebar and concrete don't cost the same thing today that they did in 2008 when we last increased the gas tax.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job.
Thank you.